Kia ora, Dr Collin Bjork, toko ingoa, and in this presentation, I would like to talk about knowing your audience and why it's crucial to communicating scientific knowledge. Let's begin. Knowing your audience is absolutely essential to communicating scientific knowledge well, but why? Why do we care about who we're speaking to when we've got the facts of scientific knowledge behind us? Why does it matter who we're talking to? And the answer is because even if the scientific knowledge stays the same, and I should say science does not always stay the same. Look at the research on COVID in the past few years, and you will see how quickly science can change. But even once science establishes a base set of knowledge about a specific topic, for example, sustainability, the way that you communicate that knowledge, what we know about sustainability, depends on who we're talking to. Not what we say, but how we say it. So the what, the scientific knowledge itself, stays more or less the same, but how much of that scientific knowledge you communicate and the language you use to communicate it, the media that you choose to communicate it in. Are you speaking orally? Are you writing your words down on pen and paper, or are you using a digital presentation? Are you using visual images? All of these different media and modes of communicating information depend on what kind of audience you're trying to reach. So the scientific knowledge about, say, sustainability might stay roughly the same, but you communicate it. The how of how you communicate it is different depending on who you're trying to speak to. So as your audience changes, your method of writing and speaking and communicating changes. That's why we care about audience. So this idea of the audience being important draws on this larger idea that writers have been using for a long, long time, and communicators, called the writers or the rhetorical situation. Okay, you don't need to know what rhetoric means, but what you need to know is that there's this triangle that's a useful heuristic for people trying to communicate scientific knowledge. Okay, at the top of the triangle, you've got writers. This is you, the scientific expert who's trying to communicate or to write some scientific knowledge to some specific audience. And your audience is there on the bottom end of the left end of the triangle. And on the right side is the issue or the topic that you're writing about. In this case, say sustainability is your topic. All right. Then you have the genre or medium that you're communicating in. Are you text messaging a friend about what you're doing in your science and sustainability course? Or are you writing an email to your professor, your lecturer of science and sustainability, okay? Or are you giving an oral presentation in your science and sustainability course, right? The medium can change that you're communicating in. And also the purpose, right? Inside the triangle, every writer or communicator has a specific purpose. You might be trying to teach, that's the image in the middle of the triangle. You might be trying to entertain, that's the jester's hat on the right side of the triangle. Or you might be trying to debate or argue, that's the swords. Hopefully you're not debating with swords, hopefully you're debating with ideas. But your purpose can change. And so the idea with this triangle is that anytime you as a communicator or a writer or a sharer of scientific knowledge, anytime you change one of these things in this little triangle, the writer, the audience, the issue, etc., it changes the way that you write. Okay? If you change the topic, obviously it changes what you write. If you change who you are as a writer, like you as a writer may be originally from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm not. I'm from Texas. That changes the way that I communicate things. Changes the way I spell things. I spell things like an American. Okay? Audience is what we're going to focus on today. If your audience changes, it changes the way that you write, and that's the primary focus. So let's dig in to what kind of information do you need to know about your audience in order to write best, to write targeted, to communicate targeted information to them. There are three things I want to suggest, at least three things that you'll want to know when writing and communicating scientific knowledge to your audience. You want to know, what do they know about your topic and what do they not know about your topic, right? So if you're writing about sustainability, they probably know that climate change is a major issue in their lives right now. They've probably experienced the dramatic weather events that are the product of human-induced climate change. Have Has your audience read the latest IPCC report? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on who you're talking to, right? So what, do they know the language, the units of measure that you use to talk about different aspects of science in your particular approach to sustainability? You need to make an itemized list of exactly what your audience knows and probably doesn't know about your topic. You want to assess their knowledge so that you can meet them where they are. That's the first thing you want to know. The next thing you want to know is their assumptions. What assumptions does your audience make about your topic, in this case, sustainability? Okay, and assumptions crucially can be right or wrong, all right? If they have incorrect assumptions about sustainability, for example, you want to know those in advance so that you can, gently redirect or correct those misinformed assumptions, right? We know there's tons of misinformation in the world right now out there. And you want to know what they might assume so that you can, use your scientific knowledge to redirect them and to challenge those assumptions in an appropriate way. So making a list of the assumptions. Some of the assumptions that they make might be absolutely right, so you want to know those. Okay, and finally, you want to know what values does your audience hold relative to your topic, right? These are things, and this is crucial actually. These are things like how much do they value like when it comes to climate change and sustainability, what things do they value maybe most and what things do they maybe value less, right? So when it comes to sustainability, are they worried primarily about the impact on their own individual lives, careers, and businesses? Or is that their primary concern? And that's an important one, right? Like the livelihood of people is affected by climate change. Or are they more affected about their children, their tamariki and their mokopuna, their descendants? Are they worried about the future that their children will have? Is that their primary value that they hold up? Or are they worried about loss of species and ecological collapse, and or are they primarily worried about breathing fresh air, about fresh water, safe to drink, right? What values does your audience hold as their primary, they're related to your topic, as the primary values that they privilege the most related to your topic? You want to try to get a sense of those. Those can be difficult to suss out, but those are important, and we'll look at an example here in a second, okay? So those are the three things that you're trying to tackle. Now, crucially, you want to know, you want to remember that audiences are not entirely homogeneous, okay? They are not exactly the same, and let's look at an example. You, Massey Science students, great. There are plenty of things you might think that you have all in common, right? The language of instruction at Massey University is primarily the English language. We actually teach a variety of other languages, obviously Te Reo Māori, but other languages. But primarily we're an English language instruction university. But not every science student is only an English speaker. We have science students who speak a multitude of languages. So there's similarity, but also diversity, which we want to recognize. Same thing, Massey scientists, many of you science students live here in Aotearoa. Cool. But many of our Massey science students live overseas, Australia, the UK, the islands, China, all over the place. So again, many similarities, but also some differences. Many Massey Science students might know a little bit about Te Ao Māori, and you certainly will after you get done with this course, but not all science students will be familiar yet with Te Ao Māori, okay? Hopefully all Massey Science students are interested in science. That's something we hope. So you want to be careful when you're thinking about your audience to think, what similarities do we have? But don't assume that everyone is exactly like the first audience member that pops in your head, and especially don't assume that your audience is exactly like you. That's the biggest risk, is too often we write a piece, we communicate a piece of information as if we were communicating it to ourselves, and that's not going to be terribly effective, okay? Find those similarities, but also embrace the diversity. Try to speak to everyone in that audience group, not just the middle of the bell curve. Righto, let's look at an example. This is an example from Maori astronomer Professor Rangi Matamua, who is, you've probably heard about him. He's one of the big names driving the Matariki holiday celebrations here in Aotearoa. And he has two pieces here on the left and the right that are both about Maori astronomy and Matariki, but are written for totally different audiences. And let's take a look at how this plays out just briefly, okay? On the right, you've got a traditional scientific journal article. At the top, you see it's written for the Journal of Astronomical History and Heritage. We know this is written not just for other scientists, but for other astronomers, and even more specific, for other historians of astronomy. That is a very detailed and very specific, narrow, professional scientific audience, okay? That's the audience for this piece. The other piece comes from I Tangata, which is an online news source that focuses on stories by and for Indigenous peoples, specifically Maori and Pacific peoples here in Aotearoa. And this is a piece that Rangi Matamua wrote called How Matariki Will Connect Us All in 2022, right before, a couple months before the first ever public holiday honoring Matariki, okay? This is written for a public audience, but crucially, it's a public audience who goes to I Tangata for information, right? So this is a public audience that is invested thinking about values, right? You want to know their knowledge, their assumptions, and their values. The values, this is an audience who cares and is invested in Indigenous issues in Aotearoa, okay? But it's also a public, right? So it's not scientific astronomers, experts in astronomy. It is a general public and probably a mostly Kiwi public here in Aotearoa. So already we can see just by the publication venue, one in a public Indigenous news source and another in a scientific journal, that we've got very different audiences. Some of those people might overlap, like I overlap. I've read both of these, but some things are different. Okay, now let's look at how those slightly different audiences affect the way that Professor Rangi Matamua writes. Okay? On the right-hand side, in the review of Maori astronomy in Aotearoa, New Zealand, look at that title. That title, very official and explanatory, right? It uses explanatory language saying exactly what this article is. It reviews Maori astronomy in this country. Full stop. It doesn't try to appeal to your emotions. It doesn't try to make a claim. It just says this is what is the content of this article. It's declamatory. It's descriptive. Okay. Whereas you look at the title of the other piece for I Tangata, How Matariki Will Connect Us All. Right. This is a claim. It's not a description of what will come. It is partly a description of what will come later, but it's actually a claim. He's saying, I'm going to tell you how Matariki will connect us all. He's setting up a proposition, and you have to read the rest to figure out, well, how will Matariki do it? You could almost put a question mark after it. He's trying to capture your attention, hook you early on to say, okay, how will Matariki connect us all if it's primarily a holiday that originates out of Maori culture? And of course, he goes on to explain how it's actually linked across the Pacific and actually how we all descend. We all have connections to ancestors who at some point looked up to the stars for direction. And this is for him, the connection. So, but you have to read the article to get there, right? It doesn't tell you at the top. He hooks us with this kind of provocative claim. Oh, it will connect us all? How will it do that? You want to know more as a reader. Also, crucially, he says us, right? He says the pronoun us, we and us are related. He's immediately linking himself as a writer to the readers and to the people of Aotearoa. He does not put us in the title of the official journal article, okay? In fact, you won't see us or I or we in that journal article, but look at the very first line on the left of the I Tangata article. I failed fifth form science because I hated it. I couldn't see a connection. In this public piece, he's beginning with his own personal experience by way of connecting with other people who struggle to understand science. He's telling a personal story to make a personal connection with other public readers. In the right example, Journal of Astronomical History and Heritage, you don't see him talking about a personal example. You see him immediately going to established scientific knowledge. He says in the opening line There is clear evidence indicating that the Maori had extensive knowledge of the night sky and cites best 1922. That's 100 years of history, at least, that Maori know this. He cites an expert, not his own experience. Okay? I'm going to stop there, but you could pause this and you could do an intensive study of just these two pieces to look at how the different audience on the right-hand side, astronomical experts and other scientists versus a Kiwi public on the left side, how the change in audience changes the way that he writes. The content is similar. It's about Matariki, it's about Maori astronomy, but the way that he writes is totally different because the audience is different. All right? These are things you're going to have to wrestle with in your own work. And I want to close by offering a kind of thinking exercise for yourself to kind of ponder as you think about how your audience might affect the way that you write about sustainability. So let's say you had to talk about sustainability with coal mining managers, right? So New Zealand has a number of coal mines that are active all across the Motu. This is a picture of one on the west coast of the South Island. And you want to talk about sustainability with these coal mining managers. So you want to know their knowledge, their assumptions, and their values. What are these coal mining managers that you're speaking with likely to know about sustainability, right? What are they likely to know about climate change? Have they read the latest IPCC reports? Maybe, maybe not. But they've probably read about the journalists' reports, what the journalists have summarized about IPCC in the news. You want to make a list of those kinds of knowledges, it could be plural, that they might have about sustainability. Then you want to think about the assumptions. What kind of assumptions might coal mining managers make about sustainability? And if you don't know these things, crucially, go ask them. Go read things that have been written by your audience. Go try to understand your audience better. Don't just guess. Try to go watch an interview by a coal mining manager to learn more about the things that are important to them before you write for this audience. Oftentimes, you may make problematic assumptions about your audience when trying to better understand them. So always best just to go straight to that audience and read and understand about them. Okay, so what assumptions do they make? And what values do they have? And make a list of each one of those things, knowledge, assumption, and values, and then use that to think about how you're going to approach coal mining managers, right? Maybe there's an assumption that there's a zero-sum game between improving sustainability and maintaining jobs. Maybe there's an assumption that if you increase sustainability, you lose jobs or in this sector, or that to keep jobs in this sector, you can't be sustainable. But that may not be the case. That may or may not be an accurate assumption. Maybe there's a way to retrain or to repurpose the skills that the coal mining managers have a whole team of people, and maybe there's a way that you can repurpose those skills in other sectors, right? So we want to know what the assumptions are so that then we can research and respond to those assumptions. Same thing with the values. What matters? The livelihood and families and communities who live in coal mining areas, that's probably pretty important. Their descendants are probably pretty important. Look at this photo. The coal mining is right next to the ocean and the bush, right? So probably the local environment matters a lot. So what kinds of values matter to your audience? And you want to make a list of each of these things and then say, okay, how do I start? How am I going to write? What kind of tone am I going to use? Am I going to use a personal experience like Professor Matamua, or am I going to write with a little bit more scientific distance? These are the kinds of questions. So I'm going to leave you with this to ponder on your own. How might you approach this particular topic if this is who you are writing for?